Here we go. So, hello. This is the Lost Meetup for tonight. We just saw the new episode called Across the Sea, and here is Mark. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Marc Oromaner. I wrote the book The Myth of Lost, and I'm a huge Lost fan, as you could probably guess since I wrote a book. But I usually joke around that on the level of 1 to 10, 10 being the most diehard Lost fan, I'm still actually only a 5, so that way it enables me to act as a liaison between normal, casual Lost viewers and the diehard fans. I understand both worlds.
That's great. So, what did you think of tonight's episode, Across the Sea?
I thought it was really interesting. They actually revealed a lot of the mythology and pretty much showed us that while they've been saying all along that they're going to explain everything from science, it seems that there was a myth basis for the story all along, unless there does turn out to be another twist in which there's some bigger picture going on, which is what I'm kind of having faith in, holding out that there is going to be an explanation for that. But even so, I definitely like where they took the story. It was very interesting, intriguing, the whole idea of light and that there's light in each of us. There's definitely parallels between that and the world that we live in, and that's ultimately what my book is about, that we're learning a lot about the show, and it teaches us about our own world. So I think it was a good way of doing that.
How much do you think this adds up to the series as a whole? What do you think tonight's episode adds to the series?
It's pretty much almost the whole foundation of the series. It's the oldest thing, the longest ago they've ever taken us back. We saw the origination of who Adam and Eve are, and we've heard a lot of theories, but we never heard the theory that it was the smoke monster and his mother. So that was definitely a surprise. They're still managing to surprise us up to the very end, and we're seeing that the stones was not really representing the fact that this was that someone had won the game, but it was just basically that it was basically just indicative that there was a game that was going to be played from this point on. So I hope they show how the game officially came about, but I think we have enough pieces of the puzzle to put it together that at some point, just based on the dialogue in this episode, Man in Black was somehow, we see that he was revived and decided to make a bet with Jacob so he can get off the island.
So, how do you feel with the Man in Black being Adam? Do you feel that does that create more questions as the nature of the smoke monster? Because we used to feel now that the smoke monster was that he just became the smoke monster, but he became himself and he was able to become other people. But now it seems that he died as a person, but the smoke monster lived on. So how do you feel that the smoke monster managed to live on? What happened with the smoke monster?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that they always called those people Adam and Eve. It seems almost as if Eve, and I'm just thinking about this now because I haven't really had time to process it, but just, sometimes your first thoughts are the correct ones.
Yeah.
It seems like Eve is almost this goddess, the goddess of the world, because she was the mother and she was this mysterious entity. She said she wasn't really human. But Adam means Adam is from the earth. That's the material world. So it seems like Adam and Eve is the combination of the spirit and the physical, and it does kind of make sense that he would be Adam and she would be Eve, and the show always kind of plays off of this dichotomy of good and evil and choice and fate, and now we're basically seeing that again between the spirit and the material, and those two come together with the black and the white once again to reveal. So it fits into the bigger picture of Lost, definitely.
So do you feel that it definitely fits in the bigger picture, but do you feel like with the smoke monster, you feel that the smoke monster was able to, the spirit, which is the smoke monster, the dark spirit, is able to live on and do all these other things, but the body itself of the Man in Black, he just stays dead, stays the skeleton. Do you feel that way?
I've heard theories, and that was something I even thought about, that one of the skeletons was going to be the body that he originally had, and I thought it was even going to be a different body, maybe his original body.
Not the original person he was, but somebody else.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be, the person he originally was, and the person we saw with him on the beach with Jacob was even another body he had taken over already at that point. So I guess now looking back at it, he was already the smoke monster at the point that he was on the island with Jacob. So yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty interesting. I think that was something that I heard that people had figured out, that they thought that the skeleton would have been his original body, but most people couldn't figure out who the female skeleton was going to be. But I still feel that we were misled a little bit, because when they originally found the bodies, Jack had said that the clothes looked like they had been about 40 years old based upon the amount of decay that they had. But
40 years old?
Yeah, I believe he said about 40 years old. So I think that kind of maybe could mean that time works differently on the island and things don't really decay. But at the same time, you know, this show, I mean, it's always kind of up for interpretation if there are mistakes being made in the show, if they're purposely leaving questions. For example, the fact that they were speaking English when originally they were speaking Latin. They did sort of a camera trick that The Hunt for Red October had done because they weren't going to make the whole movie in Russian.
That's right, yeah.
They just kind of went close and then they came back to speaking English. But the question is, how are they now speaking English to the rest of the characters, the Losties on the show?
Yeah.
So there's some weird kind of odd things going on.
I think a lot of the crazy things they've been doing these last couple of seasons has been what they've wanted to do, but didn't know really what they wanted to do because in the first 3 seasons they didn't even know if the show was even going to continue. Right. So what's gone on for 6 seasons, and this has been an amazing ride.
Yeah.
One last question: how do you feel the explanation, the backstory of the Man in Black and Jacob, and the timeline and everything? How do you feel that fits in with what you've written in your book?
Well, at the time that I wrote the book, it was the end of 3rd season, so at that point, we had only heard the name Jacob. I feel that the mythology is going to work no matter what, and the whole mythology is that the island is basically a microcosm for the world that we live in, and that's going to remain true. Everyone is connected, everything happens for a reason, that there's fate that exists. So the story that they kind of create is something that's just going to kind of help us to understand it. But as far as the details, I mean, it's still kind of so close because we see that there's the characters, the Losties, all have these issues, and when they solve them, they die. And it seems like even the Man in Black himself has a major issue, and that's kind of why he's stuck on the island. So I still feel like it plays, and I even had said in the book that, you know, the details, there's so much interpretation in art. I mean, someone could look at the Mona Lisa and say, you know, I'm absolutely sure that that's Leonardo da Vinci self-portrait of himself, or, you know, there's a million different ways you can look at it, and the artist can come back and say, well, kind of what I was saying was this. But is that necessarily the answer? Is there a wrong and right answer? It's really how you interpret it. It's art.
Because once the artist creates art, he puts it out there, and it's
up for the individual, and it could have different meaning for each person.
That's right.
And you know, it's right for everyone. That's the paradox of life. That, you know, what's right for you, your interpretation might be totally different than someone else's, and they can contradict each other. But that could be the correct meaning for what you're getting from it. That's why there's so many different levels of meaning within the show, and that, you know, that's why it's such a gem, because it's so rich in mythology, and you know, there's something in there for everybody.
So I guess extra question. So you feel that. This is the extra question, but it's really the last question. So you feel Lost is a work of art?
Yeah, sure. I think all great literature and television and mythology is definitely a work of art. Anything, you know, art is basically something that I think, you know, tries to explain the world that we live in, but the real world is so complex that really, in order to be able to download it into this world, it has to come through in symbolism and archetypes and metaphors, because it exists on many different levels. It's not just a straightforward answer, and that's exactly what Lost does. And Lost is a modern metaphor, just like modern myth, just like Star Wars or The Matrix or any of those shows. In 100 years from now, they're still going to be talking about Lost, you know, just like they'll still be talking about Star Trek and Star Wars and all those kind of things. I don't think they're going to be talking about American Idol in the same way.
I mean, same with other great movies like 2001: Space Odyssey and Blade Runner. Those films lived on because they've been the type of art that's been so open for interpretation and theories and different things like that.
Exactly.
But, okay, so that's it. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
All right, you're welcome. That's Mark, everybody. He's the writer of The Myth of Lost, which is on sale on Amazon.com, and
it's on Amazon.com. It's on BarnesandNoble.com.
Awesome. It's a really good book. So try to pick it up.